On a Sunday morning last March, Paul Njoroge's life went silent. He lost everything most precious. His wife, his 3 kids, his mother-in-law. When Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 dove into the ground.
There hasn't been a day where I don't think about me being in the same plane with my family. And right from the start, I would wish that I was there with them. Today, I do live to keep their memories alive. And I'm their voice.
We first met Paul a few days after the tragedy in Bishoftu, Ethiopia. He was in shock, barely able to walk to the very place his family had died. He'd booked their flights from Toronto to Addis Ababa and then on to Nairobi, while he stayed back a week to work.
Does it give you any peace coming here?
I'll never have peace. I can't have peace.
Months later, Paul is still struggling to carry on.
I think about my wife a lot. Because she was there with the children and my mom-in-law. And she knew they're going to die. It doesn't leave me that my children, my wife and my children's flesh is out there in Ethiopia. It's mixed with the sand and the jet fuel and the pieces of the aircraft. Never goes away.
One crash was tragic enough, but 2, the MAX 8 was suspect. Around the world, airlines grounded their MAX 8 fleets because of striking similarities with a Lion Air jetliner which plunged into the sea last October.
What has brought us here today is this tragedy from March 10th.
U.S. lawyers are suing Boeing on behalf of 14 victims from Canada. They allege it was negligent, putting profits ahead of safety, and that it concealed the true nature of an automated flight control system called MCAS, which the pilots could not override.
They knew, or should have known, or ought to have known, that the plane design was flawed. I look at Boeing as a company that focused on profits instead of the safety of human life.
More passengers from Canada died in that Ethiopian field than from any other country save for Kenya. It was spring break. Families were traveling. And so were young delegates to a UN conference in Nairobi. Daniel Moore was one of a group of 4 Canadians heading to Kenya to make their mark as future environmentalists. She was 24 and poised to take on the world.
I think that Danielle would want us to be strong together, to support each other, and to also take care of the passions that she's had as well.
Danielle and her brother David were close.
Yeah, she's always been my biggest inspiration.
Danielle's parents, Chris and Clarisse, and her 2 Davids, a brother and a partner, are only now planning a celebration of Danielle's life. Like all families, they're still waiting for positive DNA identification and the return of any remains, trapping them in an emotional limbo.
It's a struggle.
Yeah. It's okay.
Sometimes you feel bad, you feel guilty. I feel guilty breathing because she's not breathing, and you just wonder, what is that 6 minute look like? How dark it is. Was she with someone? Was she calling me? Was she thinking of me? Like, was she suffering? I don't know. So every morning, every night is always a struggle. And as what Chris said, it's the new norm, but I don't like the new norm. I want my old norm.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Clarisse and Chris want someone to be held personally accountable. They won't accept a conclusion that Daniel's death was pilot error or even an accident.
When Daniel traveled, I never thought that it will be the plane. Never. And it was the plane. It was the Boeing. The people who works around that, who failed us, who failed every 157 people on that plane.
I'd like to have more responsibility, people to take ownership, and to be accountable. You need to have a person's name, people who made decisions. Right now, they're hiding behind the corporate veil.
Boeing is now caught up in 2 ongoing accident investigations and more inquiries from U.S. federal agencies examining the FAA's role. Lawsuits are piling up, the Canadian families suing for wrongful death and millions in damages. Boeing has offered to go to mediation in the cases rather than face a trial. At the recent Paris Air Show, Boeing secured a first tentative new order for 200 MAX aircraft, and its CEO spoke to the tragedy.
We are very sorry for the loss of lives as a result of the tragic accidents of both Ethiopian 302 and Lion Air 610. Safety is sacred in this company.
Does that give you any comfort?
No, because they're just words, right? You know, what is their safety policy? I'd like to know, because if they do put safety first, then the second crash would never have happened.
This is the picture of the morning she left. She had lost her teeth.
The morning she left for
the
Kenya
flight.
this time?
Yes.
Mohammed Ali lost his 5-year-old niece Sophia
This is my son with my sister.
and his sister Amina from Edmonton.
Yeah, I initially thought she was gonna miss that flight.
He was supposed to be on that flight with them, but in the last week changed his plans.
When Amina passed on, it was such a painful death because we don't have her body, you know. To be honest, she's still flying. She left us, she's on the plane to this point. We don't know what happened, right? Like, we know what happened, but we don't feel that she is gone until we for sure say, oh, that hand I can remember, you know, that, you know, nose I can tell, whatever is left, you know, that's her, you know, and we haven't had that part.
Ethiopian Airlines has outsourced identifying remains to a British company. It could be September before families get confirmation. But by mid-July, they will be able to search a database of personal belongings. At the same time, Boeing is trying to persuade national regulators and airlines, including in Canada, to lift the ban on the MAX 8.
Like, what have you done to fix these planes? You're just saying everything's fixed now. How do we know? Like, we need some transparency, because I don't trust them anymore, honestly.
I never, at any point in my life, envisioned life without my wife and my children. I never did that.
Paul Njoroge has found some comfort with other bereaved parents, and he's helped with memorials like a tree planted at his kid's school. But his grief is often laced with anger.
It doesn't concern me about what Boeing can pay to the families of the victims or whatever. It doesn't concern me. If Boeing can be allowed to manufacture planes that can fall from the sky anytime, if the management dysfunction continues, the lack of internal oversight continues, to whom is it well? We all fly on these planes. It's not well with me.
To smother the loneliness that all these families feel, Paul runs day after day, to exhaust his body so his mind will sleep, to chase away the longing for a little while.
I do have nightmares a lot. Nightmares about planes falling from the sky. You know, sometimes I have nightmares where I'm talking with them, I'm playing with them, only to wake up and realize that I'm still alone. And I'll be alone for the rest of my life.
Honoring their passing is what keeps Paul going.
So, Susan, these families remain in such grief. Why is it taking so long for the return of their loved ones' remains?
Well, you know, that plane dove into the ground with such a force, Adrian, that much of the plane's structure was obliterated. So Ethiopian Airlines have already warned families that there may be no DNA match at all for some of them. Where there were remains, the DNA has now been extracted and it's being matched with samples given by the families. It's just a long process.
Sure is. What about the 737 MAX 8s? What's it going to take to get those finally back in the air?
Well, you know, airlines had canceled their MAX 8 flights only till August, and now it's been pushed back to September earliest. There's two lingering questions: safety and confidence. On the safety issue, Boeing says it's completed a software update and it has new training rules for that aircraft. But just today, the FAA said a new potential risk was discovered in a simulator test, and so Boeing has to address that. And on the confidence, well, they've been going on a bit of charm offensive to persuade airlines and crews that the plane is safe. But just like last week, you'll remember Sully Sullenberger, the pilot who landed the plane on the Hudson. Well, he testified that the automated flight control system on the MAX 8 was fatally flawed and should never have been approved. We talked to WestJet and Air Canada. They both told us they're waiting for the regulators to lift the ban on the planes, and Air Canada says it will do additional safety evaluations at that point.
All right, Susan, thanks very much.
Okay.